Special meeting of the Park District of Highland Park is called to order at 6:35 p.m. Kathy, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein will be here shortly. Commissioner Grossberg.
Here.
Commissioner Flores Weisskopf.
Here.
Vice President Ruttenberg.
Here.
President Kaplan.
Here. Okay, we can start. First is an open invitation of the public to address the board. If someone from the public speaks, please state your name and address and sit in the hot seat. Don't all rush up.
Is this the hot seat?
That's the hot
That's
seat.
it.
Good evening. My name is Kurt Meyer. I live at 948 Judson Avenue in Highland Park for about the last 37 years. I'm also a member of the North Shore Yacht Club, the title of which sounds much grander, of course, than it really is. It really is a community of people who love to use the lakefront in all its aspects. We want to work very positively with the park board to preserve access to all those amenities, whether it be the sailing beach, the clubhouse itself, and of course the problems we all face with the breakwater and barge situation. We know that you, the park board, have a series of challenges to face in terms of maintenance on several different issues that we're aware of. But I would submit to you that this is one that deserves a lot of attention because it is such a positive asset compared to so many of the rest of the North Shore communities. And I personally know of two different people who decided to move to Highland Park when they came in from elsewhere because they wanted that lakefront access and all the various recreational facets that were available there at Park Avenue Beach, including the ability to launch a boat. So really, that's all I have to say. I'm open to any questions, but I would be surprised if you were going to ask me one.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Attitude and interest survey discussion, Amalia Schwartz to start.
All right, good evening. So after months of waiting, tonight we will be presenting the results from the Attitude and Interest Survey. Before I pass it on to Jeff Andreasen from Acuity, I want to give a little bit of a recap of how we got here. So the Attitude and Interest Survey was first presented to the board in March, where staff recommended entering into a contract with Acuity to administer the Attitude and Interest Survey. As we stated in March, the recommendation for an Attitude and Interest Survey is twofold. One, the district was due for an assessment following the agency's policy, and two, the information gathered through the survey will inform the review of Greenprint as well as our long-term strategic planning. So we surpassed our goal. This is a good news. We surpassed our goal of 800 survey respondents. So between May 17th and July 23rd, 851 households responded to the survey. So it's really a great response from our community. Acuity administered the data collection and they conducted all the analysis, and Jeff is here tonight to present, so I'm going to pass it on to him and he will go into a lot more detail on that, and I'll get the presentation for you ready. See if I can,
Thank you for having me back. Good to see everyone again. As Amalia said, I'm going to walk through the overall findings from the survey, covering all of the questions that we asked, and providing a little more background and information on the process and our methods and our approach, and obviously answer any questions that you have, whether it's about the findings or the results or the interpretation, as well as, again, the approach that we took with this survey. Yes.
If we have a question or clarification, do you want us to wait till the end or ask it at that time?
Feel free to interrupt me. I'd rather address them as we go along. So, yeah, don't be afraid to cut me off. So, as Amalia said, we we conducted the survey a few months ago. Our goal was to get at least 800 households to respond to the survey. We received results from 851. We sent out invitations, paper questionnaires, follow-up reminder, postcards, offering the households and the residents of Highland Park to respond to the survey, giving them 3 options. They could complete the mail survey and send it back to our offices in Evanston, where we coded the answers and entered the information. We provided them a link which was unique to each household, so that they could complete the survey online. Or if they preferred, they could contact us and complete the survey over the phone with one of our interviewers in Evanston. Every household was assigned a PIN. That unique link that I referenced for the online surveys meant that if a household completed the survey, whether it was online or by mail or over the phone, we checked the PIN to make sure that nobody was responding more than once to the survey. So everybody could respond once, but only once. Nobody could game this to express their opinions multiple ways. Most of the people filled out the paper survey and sent it back, a little over 600, and 237 completed the survey online. Only 3 people opted for the phone interview. We then looked at our 851 respondents and looked at where they lived based on their geocoded mailing address, their self-reported gender, age, whether or not they've got children under the age of 18 in the household, and race and ethnicity, and compared that to the most recent U.S. Census estimates for the city of Highland Park. And where we needed to, we weighted our respondent data to align with those demographics from the census and the regions. The reason we do this is because not everybody responds to the survey at similar levels, and we wanted to make sure that when we were presenting the results from our 851 respondents, that our sample was demographically and regionally representative of the entire community, not just those who felt more inclined or skewing away from those less inclined to complete the survey. So from a demographic standpoint, we're confident that regionally, gender, race, ethnicity, and whether or not they've got children in the household, our sample is reflective of the entire community.
Jeff, we had discussed making it available in Spanish. Did anyone take us up on that offer?
Nope. Yeah, it was offered, all the mailings had in Spanish an offer that if they felt more comfortable completing the survey in Spanish to let us know, but nobody took advantage of that.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry. Could you explain what you mean when you say it's weighted to match the demographics?
So, for example, I think if I go to so this is a map of the district on page 4, it looks like, and we divided up into regions. So we looked at the distribution of our survey respondents, which is represented by the blue dots. So you can see visually where the survey respondents live. And then we compared that to the actual population by those regions. So we show 44% in the Northwest region in green. If our survey responses were 40% in the Northwest, we would weight those to, upweight those to represent 44% of the sample. And if that were the case, then one or a combination of those regions would be a little higher in our sample, so we had to downweight those to their actual percentages.
And then you do the same thing for the other factors, I assume.
Gender, age, race, ethnicity, and children in the household. And all of those are, the other demographic variables are on slide 3, where you can see the distributions. Those with an asterisk are the ones that I mentioned that we weighted to the data. We also asked people how long they've lived in Highland Park, and this is a very stable community. There are not a lot of people moving in and out of the community. The average mean number of years of living here is 24, which is higher than we see in a lot of other communities. And we also asked household income as well. We find that household income is not always the most reliable survey response. A lot of people aren't comfortable answering it. Some people answer differently than what the reality is for whatever reason.
Like what they think they should be getting?
Who knows? But those are the variables that we weighted by, and that's how we weighted them, to make sure that they align with census data. Any other questions on how we collected the data or how we prepared and weighted the data for analysis? The one thing I will say, we did a survey for the North Shore School District a couple of years ago on the consolidation, and that little area up in that little northwest pocket up in Highwood, Fort Sheridan area, I don't think we got anybody in that school district survey responding to that one. I was really happy to see that we got some responses from that area in the Park District survey. Okay. With that, findings, these are generally in the order in which the questions were asked in the, as in all of our surveys. We start very broad and general about overall opinions about the Park District, facilities and parks that they use, their overall satisfaction, and then as we get further into the survey, we get into more specific areas about specific amenities that they want or feel are needed, specific programs that they'd like to see, specific capital improvements that they feel are priorities, and so on. So starting out with an overall esteem rating, their overall opinion of the Park District, we asked them to rate the district on a 0 through 10 scale. Your average rating on that scale is a 7.6, which is considered, very positive, very good overall. 38% of the respondents hold you in the highest regard, gave you ratings of 9 or 10. We include a 9 in there because oftentimes people say, I never give 10s. So 9 for them is their highest rating. And then another 28% hold you in very high esteem, giving you a score of 8, and then 19% are somewhat positive. Only 8% are dissatisfied with the Park District overall, and another 7% are neutral, meaning they don't have a strong opinion about you either way, positive or negative. If somebody is, for whatever reason, not familiar with the Park District, at least not enough to offer an opinion or a rating, we give that as an option, and 12% of the respondents took that option. So that 12% is not included in those ratings. But again, overall, very positive scores. If you look at it in terms of your proportion of favorable responses to unfavorable responses, you have 85% giving you positive ratings versus 8% giving you negative ratings. So better than 10 to 1 positive to negative ratio in terms of their overall opinions. We also looked at how your ratings stack up relative to benchmarks that we've collected statewide and also for communities in the area and some specific districts specifically. And you can see that your scores are a little bit better than the statewide average, and they align pretty closely with the Northbrook Park District. We did a survey for them in 2014. But when we look at surrounding agencies in the aggregate from 2013, your scores, while good, just are not quite as high as they are for those other agencies. Those being the agencies in Bannockburn, Deerfield, Glencoe, Glenview, Kenilworth, Highwood, Lake Bluff, Lake Forest, Northbrook, Northfield, Wilmette, and Winnetka. So the North Shore and a little bit further west for the most part. We then asked in an open-ended question what residents like most about the Park District of Highland Park, or what they think your strengths are. 79% offered some kind of feedback regarding the positives. There was 1% who said there's nothing they like at all, and the remaining 21% left the question blank or didn't offer a response. Of those who answered the question, the 671, those are reflected in the bar charts and the percentages to the right. So of those people, the programs and events that the Park District provides was the number one thing that they like most about you. The variety of the programs, the number of programs, and so on came up, that there's something for all ages, one of the frequent responses in there. And then a variety of youth programs specifically came up as something they appreciate most in that category. Slightly fewer, 37% overall, value the facilities in the district, especially the rec center came up most often, and then a variety of other specific facilities scattered across those, or people just saying, I like the facilities in general without specifying any certain specific location. And then almost as many, 34%, said they appreciate the parks, especially how well maintained they are, that they think they're good and good variety in general. And Rosewood Beach also came up specifically as one of the parks that they like the most.
Jeff,
Yes, sir.
so almost 200 people didn't answer this question. Do we ever know why? Like, this is such a benign question.
I don't know that it's because it's a sensitivity issue. It's a paper survey. They can skip it. They just not want to take the time. And to fill it out just takes up more time. I would imagine that if they have something they really like, or in the next slide, something they really dislike, they'll take the time to fill it out.
Okay.
But if not, I just interpret that as I really don't have anything to offer. Not that I don't want to, I have something I don't want to offer. Does that make sense?
Yep,
Okay,
thank you.
sure. And then wrapping up the major positives, 14% cited staff or the management or the Park District folks at the facilities, the instructors. Mostly they're helpful, they're friendly, they're polite, easy to work with, and good communications overall. And then the rest of them are come in at lower percents. As I mentioned, we also then ask in a separate open-ended question what residents dislike most about the Park District, or what improvements they would like to see most. To this question, 60% offered a response, meaning 40% did not, and included in that 40% are 3% who said, there's nothing I dislike about the Park District. I think everything is good with the Park District. Of the 510 people who offered a response to this question, they give a more balanced set of responses, but the number one response was something about management or staff or the administration of the Park District. And a lot of that had to do with concerns about waste and tax dollars. Now, when we look at the open-ended responses, a lot of those are hearkening back to issues from 8-10 years ago that are still in people's minds about some of the salaries or benefits and so on from previous staffs or groups and boards. So some of that is still retained in the minds of residents in the community, even when they think about the Park District today. Other issues that came up regarding staff is just a need to communicate the information better, and in terms of staff, just better service overall. That was followed by questions or concerns about specific facilities. The rec center came up, and a lot of that was just a need for more upkeep, better maintenance, better washroom facilities, and so on. Likewise with the pools, some of those comments come up as well. 19% mentioned something about parks and playgrounds, and again, mostly around just the need to maintain them better. And we'll get more on the maintenance issues, some later questions in a moment. 18% mentioned something about programs, and it was really pretty balanced between people wanting more programs for adults versus more better programs for youth, especially youth sports programs. And then rounding out that list, 14% were unhappy with the cost or fees from the district. And then any issues regarding access and availability were really more around scheduling and hours and those kinds of things regarding programs and facilities. We then asked residents to provide an estimate without checking tax bills or going on the internet, to provide their best estimate as to what percent of their property taxes they think goes to the Park District. The average was a little over 8%. The midpoint, or the median estimate, was at 5%, and so they're generally in the ballpark in terms of understanding that, in fact, 5% of a resident's property taxes goes to the Park District. They might be a little high, but they're basically in the ballpark. And that came from the 86% who were able to give an estimate.
It's 6%, right?
Pardon me?
6% of.
Oh, I'm sorry, 6%.
Yeah, 5% were right
Thank
about
you.
it being
Thank
6%.
you. Thank you. Yes. So the actual amount is right in between the median and the average at 6%. In a later question, much further back in the survey, the question wording informed the respondent that, in fact, the Park District share of their property taxes is 6%, and given that, and thinking about the programs and facilities and parks and services that the district offers, we asked them to rate the value that 6% of their property taxes represents on a 0 through 10 scale. Again, the score is positive. It's lower than your STEAM rating, but that's not unusual. We often see that for the districts, but it's certainly positive. 5 was an average value. It was of average value, so 6.9 is well above that. And it was pretty consistent. There weren't a lot of differences or groups giving higher or lower ratings. Women and newer residents tended to rate it at a higher value than longer-term residents, and men, obviously non-users or visitors of the parks and facilities, rated it lower, but even that group gave it an above-average rating at 5.8. So nobody thinks it represents a poor value by any means. Even those giving lower scores feel it represents at least a good value. Comparing that to the benchmarks, again, your value ratings are in line with the statewide benchmark and with Northbrook. It's important that statewide benchmark, the 2013 data, provided an aggregate percent for the entire state. So while Park District of Highland Park represents 6% of property taxes, for the state, that amount was a 2% share of property taxes. So when they're rating the value statewide, it's for 2% as opposed to 6%. So given that, the 2013 neighboring benchmarks in those southeast Lake counties and northeast Cook County agencies get higher scores, especially in that kind of good value, the 6s and 7s that you can see there. So they in Glenview specifically are in the mid-7s, whereas you're in the high 6s, almost at 7 on an average rating. So again, strong score, in line with or slightly behind some of the neighboring agencies. We then asked which Park District of Highland Park facilities and parks they or someone in their household have used or visited in the past year. All but 7% selected at least one of the parks and facilities, and of the 785, or the 93% who had visited, you can see the percentages there. The rec center in Rosewood Beach clearly separated out as being the most widely used destinations, followed by Sunset Woods Park at 55% of those who reported going to one of your properties. And then that was followed by the Heller Nature Center in Hidden Creek at a little over a third. Beyond that, there were a number of things from the high 20s to the mid to high teens that you can see listed there. Slide 13 shows from where each of these parks and facilities draws residents. So in reading the rows across for the Recreation Center of Highland Park, we've got that 49 circled there, which means 49% of those who said that they've been to the rec center come from that northwest region. And that northwest region represents 44% of the sample, or 44% of the population. So the users of the rec center are a little bit more highly represented, or more likely to come from that northwest area, which is why that's circled. Likewise, for Rosewood Park and Beach, while 36% of all residents live in that southeast area, 41% of those who've gone to Rosewood come from the southeast. So you'll obviously see where these parks and facilities are located, that they tend to draw more from people who live nearby and less so from people who live further away. What to me is more interesting are the parks and facilities that are drawing fairly evenly across all of these regions, meaning nothing is circled. So Sunset Woods, Heller Nature Center, Hidden Creek, Sunset Valley Golf Club, and the Golf Learning Center are pretty much in line with how the population is distributed. So they're drawing pretty evenly from across the city, as opposed to the more proximate neighborhoods or residents. Any questions on this slide? This one looks at the data a little bit differently, but I think is still useful in terms of knowing who's going to which facilities based on where they live. We're on slide 13.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. For those who've been to one of your parks and facilities, we then ask them to rate their satisfaction overall, not for each individual park or facility, but thinking about the 1 or the 15 or however many parks and facilities they've been to, rate their satisfaction on a 0 through 10 scale in terms of the overall experience, the maintenance and upkeep at the facilities and parks, overall safety, accessibility, and any service provided by district staff. And here, residents are extremely satisfied. You see the average scores on the far right are in the low to mid 8s on a 0 through 10 scale, much higher than your overall esteem rating. So in terms of their experience of your parks and facilities, residents overall are very satisfied. Across the board, you get roughly half or more giving you the highest scores possible, 9s and 10s on a 0 through 10 scale. And nothing gets more than an 8% dissatisfied, and most items are 5% or less dissatisfied.
Jeff, was safety defined anywhere, or that's each person's interpretation?
It wasn't defined any more beyond this, and our understanding, there may have been a few open-ended comments about safety, but generally in these surveys, the safety comments are more about perception or concerns as opposed to actual incidents. I don't feel safe walking through the parks at nighttime after dark. It's not to say I'm seeing something that worries me or something has happened that worries me. It's more of a perception. But again, that's the area where you get your highest ratings. And that's not always the case that we see in surveys for other agencies. So the safety one is one to feel especially good about. I mentioned from the open-ended comments a number of comments about better maintenance in terms of parks or facilities and so on. This was a question that we designed specifically for Highland Park, where people were given a choice between two statements. One said that many of the parks and equipment look tired, outdated, run down, need much better landscaping equipment and improved features, versus others who say, for the most part, parks and playgrounds look to be in good shape and don't need much more beyond ongoing maintenance. A plurality, almost half of the respondents chose the second option, saying, for the most part, they're in good shape and don't really need nothing beyond normal maintenance and upkeep. Fewer than 1 in 5, 17%, took the counter argument that there are some serious needs and improvements that need to be addressed. 35% didn't have an opinion either way and took a neutral position, meaning they just may not notice it as much as the 65% who responded. We then, in an open-ended question, asked people if they are dissatisfied with any parks or any facilities, to identify which ones specifically and what it is about each of those that they're unhappy with. And in this question, 30% offered a wide range of issues in parks and facilities. We're providing the top ones here. The one that came up most often is the rec center. At the top, 67 responses came there, and you can see the breakdown of what their concerns are. And again, it's mostly around the need for better maintenance and upkeep, issues with staff interactions or service issues, limited parking, it's hard to get into the facility at times when it's crowded, improvements to the restrooms, just general cleanliness overall, and so on, and it trickles off from there. In the full report, we have lists of the verbatim responses, the actual responses, so you can see how people articulate these categories more specifically. Following the rec center, Rosewood Park and Beach came up from 37, and for Rosewood, it was largely around parking and accessibility. On crowded days, it's hard to find a place to park there. And then beyond that, it was more back to the maintenance and upkeep issues. And then it dropped off from there. 20 people cited the Park Avenue boating facility and beach, largely around the barge and the breakwater, followed by accessibility issues. About as many mentioned something about Sunset Woods Park. And then from there, it trailed off into fewer responses around the ice arena, again, maintenance, restrooms, accessibility, meaning not enough parking. Larry Fink Park. Larry Fink Park, Commissioner Flores Weisskopf, was one area where 3 people said they had safety concerns at Larry Fink. Came up more than anywhere else, but again, it was still only 3 people. So for whatever reason, safety was something that came up, albeit not very often there. And then you can see the rest of the facilities and issues that come up. And again, these are the ones that came up most often. Any questions on this, surprises? Okay. We also asked if people were dissatisfied with the park district and the parks and the facilities, if their dissatisfaction regarding park district staff interactions or service had more to do with the type of service or response that they received from staff, or if it had to do more with kind of a rule or policy or decision that the agency has put in place, and if that's the source. And the responses were fairly divided, although almost half said it was primarily or exclusively more about the policy or the rules in place and less about specifically the staff interaction. Only 26% said it was more about the level of service that they received from someone with the district. And then 29% said it was a combination of the two. We also asked what residents who use the parks specifically like to do there. They could give multiple responses to these. Not surprisingly, going to the parks for walking or jogging or some form of exercise came up more often. About half mentioned some other type of passive leisure activity that they take part in. 36% said they go there to use or for family members to use playground equipment, and then it trails off there beyond those top 3. For the 7% overall, which represented 57 respondents in total, who said they haven't been to any of the parks or facilities in the past year, nor has anyone in their household wanted to understand why not. What were the barriers, or what were the reasons to not using them? And by far, the biggest reason was, I don't have any kids, or my kids are all grown. Why would I go to the parks? Why would I go to any of your facilities? So clearly a perception from those respondents, anyway, that the parks are for families or those with young children, and not for people who don't have kids or empty nesters. And so that's a big opportunity for the Park District to demonstrate that it does offer something for everybody at all life stages and all lifestyles. Beyond that, the barriers or the reasons really dropped, and you can see, 17% said they tend to go somewhere else, either private health clubs for exercise, or country clubs, or neighboring districts or agencies. And then beyond that, it was largely around just kind of lifestyle issues. I'm just too busy, I don't have time, I'm just not interested, that doesn't appeal to me. Those will be tougher things to try and address to get those people to come. Only 8 people said that the cost of the fees to use the facilities or the programs were the barrier to usage. So it was really more this perception of who the Park District parks and facilities are for, and how these few residents feel that they're less relevant to them. We also asked about special events that the Park District provides, and we gave them some examples of what those included: the Egg Hunt, Fourth Fest, Touch a Truck, Halloween. My eyes are going. The Halloween, experience. Thank you. Just to give them some examples, and again, the satisfaction scores are very high here. The vast majority are expressing some level of satisfaction. Only 5% were dissatisfied. A large number, 29%, were neutral. And when we see a number that size, it tells me people don't have a real strong understanding of all the events, and therefore don't feel comfortable offering a rating either way. We then started asking about indoor recreational facilities to try and get a needs assessment of understanding where the demand is and the interest in for these facilities, and then understanding to what degree they think that that demand or need for those facilities is currently being met. It's important to understand that these questions are asked outside the context of the Park District. In other words, we're not asking, how interested are you in the Park District providing a fitness center or studio? We're asking about interest in fitness centers or fitness studios in general. And likewise, we're asking how well that need is being met currently, whether by the Park District or by any other provider. Could be the YMCA, JCC, Country Club, Fitness Center, and so on. So when we first asked about these facilities, 59% of the respondents said that they or their household has a need or interest in a fitness center or studio. 40% expressed the same for an indoor pool. And then a number of these came in the high 20s to high teens to mid 20s. Rental rooms, indoor ice, gym space, indoor tennis, indoor playground, gymnastic studio and facility. It's important to note at the bottom, 18% said none of those indoor amenities were of interest or need to their household. So people could give multiple responses to this. And then what we do is we plot those responses represented by the vertical axis here. This is the percent who said, yes, we're interested in that. So a little over 50% said that they were, or 60% about said they were interested in a fitness center, 40% in an indoor pool, and so on. And then we ask, of those people who are interested or have a need for a fitness center, on a 1 to 5 scale, how well is that need being met? Is it not being met at all, or is it being completely met, again, whether by the Park District or any other source in the community? And that's represented on the horizontal scale. So the 60 plus or minus percent who are interested in a fitness center, about as many, 65, 70% feel that that need is currently completely or mostly being met already. So it's up in this quadrant, meaning it's a high demand item, and it's being sufficiently addressed already. Again, whether it's by the Park District or somewhere else. A number of these indoor amenities have lower levels of need or demand, but of those people who are interested in them, a majority of them say that each of those are pretty well available already, somewhat or completely. And so they're in this quadrant over here. There are 3 items that had lower demand overall, but of those people who are interested in them, relatively few said that those amenities are currently available. Indoor playground, indoor turf fields, and performance art studios. So in terms of indoor features, indoor amenities, for the most part, the ones in highest demand are being met, and there are a few lower priorities that could be considered. The other way to look at this is if you were to draw a diagonal line from this corner up to this corner, anything above that line would be one where there's a certain level of demand but low availability. Indoor playground may be just above that line. So of these, this might be the one that represents a gap in the community. Any questions on these findings, these takeaways? I want to make sure because we've got a couple other charts like this. Okay. And then we also show the charts. The one I showed previously, this one had the percent saying my need is completely or somewhat, mostly or completely being met. If we take the mostlys out and say only the completelys, everything just shifts to the right. So it's very rare that somebody says a need for a facility is completely being met. You're getting you're getting close on some of them: fitness center, indoor pool, gymnasium, indoor ice. But again, nothing in very high need. When we ask which one of those indoor amenities should be the top priority for the Park District to either add, improve, or provide, the top response was 36% saying none of those are a priority or need for me or my household. And I think that's a reflection, again, that so many of these are seen as in pretty good supply already. Of those who offered a response, fitness center, studio, as an improvement or an enhancement came up most often at 17%, followed by that indoor playground. So again, as I mentioned earlier, that indoor playground came up very low initially, but the people who want an indoor playground really want it because there aren't very many options for them. So that kind of rose to the top when we asked them to choose just one that they thought was most important. We then asked the same set of questions about outdoor recreational facilities. And here, having an outdoor water park and pool was clearly the highest demand. About a third also said they were interested in dog parks, driving ranges, or a mini golf batting cage complex. 26% said they have a need for outdoor sports fields, and then it drops off from there. And then when we do our plot, again, the 44% who said we have a need for a water park or pool, close to 80% of them said, yeah, we've got one. It's pretty easy to get to, and it's convenient and meets my needs. Same with a driving range, same with sports fields, and to a slightly lesser extent, a dog park and a skate park. Those who are interested in these, a majority of them, for the most part, feel that they're currently available. We see more in these lower priority areas, and again, the ones that come up in higher demand but are seen as less available, I would probably call out the mini golf batting cage complex as being a potential opportunity that currently isn't being addressed in the community. Again, we show this with just those who said that their need is completely being met, and even with that, you get almost half interested in a pool saying their need is completely being met. That's pretty strong. Again, when we wrap up and ask if you can only choose one of these outdoor facilities, which one should be the top priority for the Park District to add, improve, or provide? Again, the top response is 37%, because for the most part, they think their needs are being met on a lot of these. In this context, the park and pool, water park and pool come up at the top, but as we saw with the indoor facilities and an indoor playground, a dog park also rises to the top here. It was kind of lower in the initial responses, but when people are forced to choose one, the people who want a dog park tend to stick with a dog park as the number one priority. We see this all the time. Dog people want a dog park. And then finally, we ask the same questions about recreational programs, whether there's a need in the household or an interest in recreational programs around special interests, at 33% saying yes. Active adult programs for those ages 55 plus, 30% said yes. Private sports lessons at 24%. And then it drops off from there. You've got 21% each saying adult arts, theater, and dance, as well as adult sports teams and leagues and programs and so on. And then when we plot these against their sense of how well these are currently being offered, the general pattern here in this one is the activities that are geared toward youth. Summer camps, youth sports, childhood enrichment, gymnastics, which I'm assuming is primarily youth, are all readily available for those people who are interested. The opportunities are more on the adult programming side. So going back to that earlier slide for the non-users, why don't you use the parks or the facilities? My kids are grown. Why would I use them anymore? The ones that represent the biggest opportunities here are those special interest activities, cooking classes, language, those sorts of things. Active adult programs, adult sports, adult arts, private sports lessons, which could be a mix of age groups. But again, the ones that represent the biggest opportunity for the district in terms of filling a gap is around adult programming, more so than youth programming. This is a trend we see all the time. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we would hear in our surveys that it was seniors who felt underserved by the park districts, by and large, and didn't find them to be very relevant to those older adults. Park districts responded in force, and now seniors are usually some of the most supportive members of the community of parks agencies as a result. Now it's that middle group, the empty nesters who are still very active and don't consider themselves seniors. And then finally, when we ask which one of those programming areas should be a top priority for the park district, again, 41% gave the top response of none of them represent a big need or a big priority, meaning they feel it's pretty well served. But when you look at what comes up to the top, the items in dark blue are all more specific to adults. Active adult programming, special interests, meditation, cooking, and so on, adult sports programs, 4% down here, adult arts, theater, and dance. And then you could argue that private lessons would also appeal largely to adults. If you combine those, you've got 37% saying some type of adult programming should be the top priority for the park district. So I think, again, for as far as takeaways, this is a very big opportunity. If people had any reasons to be unhappy with your programs or events, they were asked to explain which ones and why. 13% mentioned something, and of those 112 respondents, most of them mentioned something about exercise or fitness programs or sports programs. And it's really pretty spread out, but a lot of it has to do with lack of availability. They're too crowded. It's hard to register or sign up for, or the hours don't fit. Some mentioned the fees or the membership costs. Others had complaints about the instructors, general organization, or maintenance, and so on. And then after that, it really dropped off. Events came up from 17 respondents. A lot of that had to do with that they were just too well-attended and too crowded. Similar things, comments, organization concerns about the egg hunt event. And then more of these continue on the next slide, but again, these numbers start to drop pretty quickly. We also then asked, in an open-ended question, what programs they would like to see for specific age groups. And so we coded these and categorized them here. Slide 36 shows the top responses. These are ends. So when you see 7 people saying before and after school or daycare for toddlers and preschoolers, 7 people mentioned that. It's not 7%. So you can see for younger kids what residents would like to see, and as they get older, you'll see that second bar for sports and athletics and fitness obviously growing the older the child gets. But art and music also comes in higher for early school-age children in that mix. For pre and early teens, sports and athletics rises to the top. Those are the biggest responses there, even more so for older high school students. Educational programs also comes in high for that age group as well. When we look at younger adults, residents didn't offer very much for the 19 to 29-year-old age group, but when you get to the 30 to 49, where you start getting into the empty nesters, sports, athletic, and fitness really starts to rise to the top among that age group. And then further on, the true empty nesters, it's still largely around sports and fitness, but you get a lot of special interests in there, and more programming in general, more availability and more times. And then for the oldest age group at age 65 plus, again, sports and fitness is not age specific, after age 5 anyway. It tends to be one of the, if not the top priority across all age groups. Toward the end of the survey, we got to specific capital improvement options that the district is looking at, gave a very brief description of each, and asked respondents to rate on a 1 to 5 scale how high a priority each one was to them and their household. 1 being it's not a priority at all, 5 meaning it's the highest priority, and a 3 being, average or in the middle. And so in looking at these, we rank them from those receiving the highest responses in terms of priority to the lowest. And you can see that 2 of them, the 2 at the top, the improvements to the playground facilities at Sunset Woods Park, received 40% saying it was somewhat or a high priority to them, and almost as many likewise saying improvements and renovation of this facility, including rooms for childhood enrichment and arts programs, the gym, administrative offices, almost as many, 38%, said that was a high priority. The average score was a 3.0. A 3.0 on this 5-point scale is average. So what that means is, and you can see it on the chart, you have about as many people saying these are high priorities at about 38 to 40%, as you have saying, no, these are low priorities at about 37, 38%. So they're pretty divided. So even though those 2 were the top 2 in terms of priorities, you had as many people saying, that's not really important to me, as those who said, yes, it is important to me. The second tier includes probably the next, probably the remaining four can fit to varying degrees. Improvements to the sports fields at Danny Cuniff and West Ridge are priorities to about 26%. 22% said improvements to the gymnastics studio and the Centennial Ice Arena entrance. I'm sorry, that's the next one. But each of those got about 22% of priority. And then repair or replace the water protection structure at the powerboat ramp at Park Avenue Boating Facility came in at 19%. So all of those last three were important to different groups of roughly 1 out of 5 residents. The boat facility, the gymnastics studio, and the entrance area of Centennial Ice Arena. Not surprisingly, these reflect, to a large degree, the usage of these facilities. The ones that, in that earlier chart where we listed in order which parks and which facilities residents use, Sunset Woods came up more toward the top. The facilities at Centennial and the Park Avenue boat facility came in mid to lower on that list. So obviously, if they use it, it's important to them. If they don't use it, it's not a priority to them. We then asked if the Park District could only do one of these, which one would be the most important or should be their top priority. And the two that clearly rose to the top on that previous slide, the playgrounds and facilities at Sunset Wood, and this facility came in clearly as number 1 and number 2. In that second tier, the sports fields at the two parks, as well as the boat ramp at Park Avenue, came in about equally at 15 to 16%, and then the improvements to the Centennial facility, both the entrance and the gymnastics studio, came in at about 9 or 10% each. So again, like we saw earlier with like the dog parks, it wasn't a priority to the community overall, but the people who wanted dog parks said, that's so important to me, it's going to end up ranking number 2. The same thing is happening here with the wave protection structure. It came up lowest in terms of priorities community-wide, but when asked to choose one, those who said it was a priority were most likely to say this is the only priority, this is the number 1 priority. And you can see that because 19% said yes, it's a priority here, and 15% said it's the number 1 priority. And I'm sure those two groups of respondents overlap a great deal. We wrapped up the survey by asking questions about where they get their information about the Park District, its programs, its facilities, and so on. They could give multiple responses here. And the numbers 1 and 2 responses were the website, followed very closely by the printed program guide. As I've shared with a lot of agencies who are looking to reduce costs, printing and mailing costs of those program guides, do so at your peril, because a lot of people still use those. They use them very differently than they use the website. The third and fourth biggest sources were non-Park District sources of information. The city, either going to the website or the newsletter or calling, or local digital or print news outlets came up next. And then the Parkline email, the member-specific emails for members of specific facilities came up next, word of mouth, and so on. Social media really didn't come up very often in Highland Park. And communications from local schools was only mentioned by 2%. So they're not getting information from schools, not nearly as much as they are from other agencies like the village or like the city or the library. And then we asked, while you might go for those, to those sources for information, which one do you prefer the most if you can only choose one? And here's where the website and the program guide clearly separate themselves from everything else. The thing that we've heard, someone at a focus group a couple years ago at another agency crystallized it for me. I go to the website when I'm buying. I know what I want. I know I want to sign up for this program. I know I need to renew my membership. I'm buying, so I know where to go. I use the program guide when I'm shopping. I don't know what I want. What's available? When is it available? What's different? What's new? And so they use those two channels very differently. In the full report on this question as well as other questions, if the data are showing statistically meaningful differences, this age group is more likely to use the website. This demographic is more likely to use the brochure. This group is more likely to go to the city. We report those in the full report. So not only on this question, but all the other questions that we've been to. I showed you a couple of those on the value where there was a gender difference on value and so on. There's much more of that information in the detailed report. 40% of the respondents said that they're aware of the district's scholarship or financial assistance program, which is obviously good but not great. There's a lot more that can be done there. We also asked where else they go for recreation or fitness activities in the area if they're not going to the Park District. The Botanic Garden came up clearly as the #1 alternative source. Programs at the library was a distant second, followed closely by private health clubs or fitness clubs or tennis clubs and so on. Forest preserves, neighboring park districts, especially for residents who live on the periphery of Highland Park. They may be going to a nearby community, and then it wraps up from there. And then we asked, in the aggregate, why do you go elsewhere to those other places for recreation and activities? This is reported in the aggregate. So I could have said one thing. I could have said, well, I've got a private gym membership, so I go there. Or I only go to the Chicago Botanic Garden as my alternative source. Or I could have given 5 responses. So just as people could give multiple destinations, alternative destinations, they could give multiple reasons for going elsewhere. We do not track them one-to-one. We didn't ask, well, why do you go to the Botanic Gardens versus why do you go to a private health club versus why do you go to a neighboring park district? We just asked it in general. And you can see that the main reasons are really varied. They feel that those other places have better or more unique facilities. They're different than what the Park District offers at 29%. At 23%, better outdoor space. I know a lot of those responses came from those Botanic Garden visitors. It's hard to compete with the Botanic Garden. 32% said that the programs or the events offered are unique or different, something that isn't readily available from the Park District. And then 28% in orange said those other facilities are more accessible, usually longer hours, longer seasons, less crowded, whatever it might be. Those were the top reasons for going elsewhere for activities. So as a wrap-up question, we asked a final open-ended question if they had any final comments or feedback to give the district, and almost half, 45%, had something to share. And a lot of it echoed what we had heard early in the survey. You'll remember that one of those initial slides when we asked, what do you dislike most about the Park District? And a lot were bringing up concerns about waste and spending and those sorts of things. those crept up again in the responses from the 45% who mentioned it. And some of them are very specific to those events. So in the beginning, I said that this is a very stable community. The average person has lived here 24 years. As a result, a lot of residents have very long memories. And what they remember from the Park District from years ago has stayed with them in terms of their perception of the Park District today. Again, a lot of those responses aren't specific to current waste or current spending patterns. It's hearkening back to that past history. And then after that, again, what we had heard earlier about more, better programs, read adult programming in that, please, and improvements to specific facilities, mostly around maintenance and upkeep and cleanliness and so on. And then the rest are mentioned each by 10% or fewer. Of the 45% who gave an answer, 13%, kind of in that mid-range group, said, I think the Park District's great. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm very happy. So, as kind of any questions on the detailed findings before I go into some of the wrap-up overview concluding statements?
Just going back, in your more detailed, going back to slide 46, where you referenced the 32%, the more better unique program, and the 28% accessibility, better hours. Is your other report more detailed about the type of respondents? Like, you were able to kind of classify one of those categories, saying those mostly came from Botanic Garden respondents.
Right.
Do you have that for the 32 and 20? Like, do you have that kind of?
Again, we have it, but it's not a one-to-one relationship. So, for example, for the Botanic Garden, I would expect the better outdoor space, that 23%. The people who said I go to the Botanic Garden, I would expect that percent to be much higher for the Botanic Garden. The issue is that some of the people who said I go to the Botanic Garden only mention that, and others mention that plus 1 or 2 or 5 other things. And so they might have said it's better outdoor space, but it's also lower fees or better programming. Mm-hmm. Not all of those things are specific to the Botanic Garden. So we couldn't do it for every individual one because it would have made the survey twice as long. But we do see some general patterns in the more detailed findings so that you can see those who go to other forest preserves are saying this versus those who are going to private health clubs or tennis clubs or fitness
Right.
centers are giving these responses.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay. So again, overall, your esteem ratings are very good, very high, very, over a 10-to-1 positive to negative overall opinion of you. You get good value ratings, good, not great, value ratings overall. And that's you as an agency, right? When we start talking about your facilities and your parks, your scores go almost through the roof.
Do you think that same pension-ish issue is dragging down?
Yeah, I think there's an image or a brand issue separate from a delivery and a performance issue, a current day performance issue. Because we are seeing that clear distinction. They love the parks. They think the parks and the facilities are great. There are some that have maintenance issues or upkeep issues or parking limitations or whatever it might be, but you're going to hear that in any survey. The overall scores are very, very strong for the parks, facilities, and programs. Again, and in that separate question, it wasn't like a large group of residents were saying the parks are in drastic need of upgrades or improvements. They're mostly saying, yeah, they need some touch-up and some basic maintenance, but beyond that, they're in really pretty good shape. So it wasn't like a crying need district-wide for improvements to the outdoor parks that we tested. Overall, the satisfaction ratings for the Park District staff likewise are very strong, averaging 8.0 or higher on a 0 through 10 rating. And if people are having service issues with the staff, It may be how the situation is handled, but more often than not, it's more about the policy that's in place and issues with the policy or the rules rather than the staff. So there may be an opportunity here to do some follow-up training with staff in terms of how to convey the rules or how to enforce those policies or explain them in a better way that's a little more sensitive and a little more appropriate. But for the most part, it seemed to be more about those rules and those policies and why they're in place, as opposed to specific staff concerns. And then, having said that, also just general client interaction training, especially at the facilities that we saw. I know the rec center came up as one of those sources where staff interaction mentioned. Again, community-wide on that list of capital improvements or projects, community-wide about 40% that the improvements to the playground facilities at Sunset Woods and at this center were a priority, but you had as many people saying those improvements are not a priority to them. The other improvements to the rec center, I'm sorry, the other improvements, these comments come from a variety of questions. They come from those priority questions that we saw where the improvements at Centennial, at Park Avenue, boating facility, the sports fields came up lower. They also come from other questions, the open-ended questions, sources of dissatisfaction. You'll remember Rosewood Park and Beach came up as a top set of volunteered responses because some days it's hard to park there or it's hard to get down to the beach in some situations. We didn't test that specifically, but the fact that it came up often in a volunteered response is why we're including that here. Had we asked that specifically about our improvements needed for parking or access to Rosewood, my guess is it would have generated a fair amount of response. So this last bullet on this slide is kind of a culmination of a lot of the detailed numbers that I shared with you earlier this evening. So again, the recreation center, we saw those comments about general maintenance and upkeeps, the washrooms and so on. Rosewood Beach we talked about. Centennial, comments about maintenance and upkeep and bathrooms again, parking issues at Centennial, and then Park Avenue boating facility. Again, it's a small group who use it, but they're very passionate about it. Other opportunities, as I mentioned before, this perception or the brand of the district and how it's still being tainted by some of the actions in the past is certainly a big opportunity and need that the agency needs to address. Demonstrating your good stewardship of tax dollars, your sensitivity to the community's needs, addressing those needs, and reinforcing the value that you represent, letting people know and keeping them aware of everything that you provide and what those tax dollars represent in the community is a huge opportunity for you. That's the drag on your overall esteem ratings and your overall perception ratings in this community, because everything else you're delivering is getting really high marks. And then the other big opportunity for you is adult programming. It's the one segment that feels it isn't being fully served. It's representing the biggest gap in terms of what people want versus what's currently available to them. The slides that I showed in terms of where people get their information, in the detailed responses, you'll see which ones are relied on most by those 40, 50, 60-year-old somethings. Those are the channels that you should be using to make them aware of what's new and available to them as opportunities. That's it.
Thank you.
It's a lot.
You want to give us more? I read it.
Wait, well,
I found it fascinating.
this presentation, the full report's 120-something, so.
So, and I want to thank Commissioner Weisskopf and Bernstein for working with you guys and staff on this, and staff. But where do we go next with all this? How do we, what is our plan and how are we going to use this to better ourselves?
Well, we talked about that a little bit, how this is just one component. It's not everything, it's not nothing. So that's where we have to rely on our other sources. But it's definitely, I'm very proud of the fact that we got, was it 851 responses when we had hoped for 800, but I think that reflects our community. They're very active and involved in what we're doing. So that's some surprising things to see. I thought, for me, Jeff, 7 seems kind of low, but you said that's okay. With a lot of the numbers were 7s and they were solid numbers versus like,
The esteem ratings, yeah, I think it was a 7.6.
there was a bunch of 7s.
Pardon me?
There were a bunch of 7s,
Yeah.
7.1, 7.2, and that's normal.
Yeah, and again, I think comparing you to your peers in the community is really the right benchmark. I wouldn't use the statewide average as the benchmark. You want to be comparing yourselves to your neighbors, and that's where we saw the gap in your overall opinion. But again, the thing that we're seeing as dragging that score is unique to Highland Park. It's very specific, and it's still part of your image.
And then Brian, I guess that would be the question
Yep.
to you.
Yep, so what staff is planning for next steps is obviously we will share the findings from the Attitude and Interest Survey with all full-time staff, so they're able to have some discussions and discuss some opportunities as we move forward. And then also staff spent the past 3 months putting together program and facility assessments. And those assessments look at a variety of usage statistics, looked at competitive analysis and some other statistical data for each facility, each program area. So we're going to get together and we're going to compare the findings from the survey with the findings from our from those assessments, from those facility and program assessments. And then from there, our plan is to regroup with the board with some internal overview, assessments, opportunities, and then discuss with the board collectively how will this fit into our master plan, how will this fit into Greenprint 2024, how will this fit into our strategic plan, our capital plan for 5 year and then 1 year out, and we will go from there.
And are we going to make this 50-page slideshow public?
Yep. So we will post it on our website, and then we'll issue a press release to the community.
Are you going to want to meet with Commissioner Bernstein and me? Or just we can start doing it as a board now?
So our thought was after staff spends some time doing internal assessment, we would bring that to the entire board, and then we, after that, kind of get a large overview of strategic and master planning where priorities lie, and then we would get together with, we regroup the Greenprint Committee with Lori, you, and Cal, and probably have 2 more meetings to start to really get specific on where we're going to focus our efforts and prioritize over the next 1 to 5 years.
So this is going to be accomplished before we get to the finalization of the capital budget?
Yes, so we plan to regroup with the board in September, the entire board, and then in October we'll have a series of meetings with our Greenprint Committee in October, and then the hope is to bring back a recommendation to the whole board on the 5-year capital plan and the Greenprint kind of revisions that we're making that were done back in 2014. So we're already going to be in the process in September and October with our budget and appropriation in our capital plan. So they'll be working in tandem together, but we believe we'll be able to accomplish this in time to make necessary budgeting projections and things like that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Todd? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Is there, from the public, do we already do that, because I was
We
late?
did that.
Okay. Do you want to take any public comment on what we just heard, since there's people from the public here?
Sure. Do you guys have any public? I got 3 of you guys back there.
I'll make
I withdraw the second to the motion to adjourn.
I don't, Bernie?
I withdraw my first.
Yeah.
We have to withdraw the
Rather,
motion
it's
to
a
go
motion on the floor that has to be voted on.
Oh, no. I withdraw it then.
first.
Okay, David Sogan once again, 1092 Wade, Highland Park. I listened to the fact that there's going to be more internal discussion, and the last time I was here made the request, as did Kurt made earlier, that the staff involve and take advantage of some of the knowledge that's located in the Park Avenue Beach community, in the boating community, that it's very clear that the golf course has a tremendous amount of expertise in the people who are running that facility. I don't think we have the same kind of technical expertise in managing boat ramps and dealing with the specific kinds of issues and challenges we have down in the boat ramp and how that facility is actually used. Anyone who wants to see a snapshot at any day, any time of the day, can go to the North Shore Yacht Club website, and on the weather page you can see a picture of who's down at the beach, and it's updated every 10 minutes, 24 hours a day. And you will generally find that, especially in the summer, there are always people coming down to that facility, and they're not just boaters. There are, people who fish, people who are just engaging the lake. So again, I would encourage the staff to take advantage of what people know. And I can give you specific examples where we've made contributions. Something as simple as, how much weight do you need on a no-wake buoy? Because you can't keep a no-wake buoy that has a buoyancy of 150 or 200 pounds with 80 pounds of concrete, because that translates to 40 pounds. It'll get washed away. And that's happened at the beach. And that's just specific knowledge that people in that community will have. You should take advantage of it.
Thank you, David. Okay.
Now you can do your motion.
Was there anybody else? Move to adjourn?
Wow.
All in favor?
Aye.
Take me right out of the minutes.
Show that we're adjourned at 7:57
Thank you.
and 24 seconds.